Major support for Carolina Business Review is provided by Grant Thornton. Operating in more than 100 countries, our tax, audit, and advisory professionals specialize in helping companies unlock their growth potential. Novant Health, bringing you world-class technology, clinicians, and care when and where you need it. And Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services with more than 300 operations in 35 countries.
What makes our contemporary public-private discussion about education so different and acute than, let's say, community building or transportation or another broader social or human service issue? And it's even more of a paradox considering that seemingly we all want the same thing, and that is the best outcome and opportunity for all of our children. Welcome to the most widely watched source of Carolina business and public policy. This time coming from the campus of SAS in Cary, I am Chris William. And on this special two-part edition of Carolina Business Review, 4 CEO leaders have declared the best place to affect the most positive change in primary education is to increase third grade reading scores. Can it be that simple? There is a growing population that feels reversing the dearth in workforce skills can be stimulated by more proficient reading in third grade. So in a moment, we will drill down into why, who, and how to best deploy this strategy. Please stay with us.
Gratefully acknowledging support by Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina. Please visit us at southcarolinablues.com. The Duke Endowment, a private foundation enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. Barings, a leading global asset management firm dedicated to meeting the evolving investment and capital needs of its clients. Learn more at barings.com. This edition of Carolina Business Review was recorded on location at SAS in Cary, North Carolina, featuring Dr. Jim Goodnight of SAS, Venessa Harrison of AT&T, Ward Nye from Martin Marietta, and Terry Akin of Cone Health. And now, Chris William.
And welcome to our program. We'll just get right into it. Thank you for joining us, by the way. We appreciate having every one of you here because I know you're on the front of this one. So, Dr. Goodnight, I want to ask you the first question. You get the first pitch, and I want to quote what you wrote, not just with the Business Roundtable, but the op-ed piece that was in the News and Observer in Raleigh. And you wrote at the beginning of 2017, among many other things, it was about third grade reading scores, and you were arguing that the outcomes and the proficient third grade reading scores were key to a lot of things. And one of the statistics that you quoted said 2015 shows that 62% of our fourth graders were not proficient in reading. So that's almost 2/3 of the kids in the state of North Carolina. But let's go back. Why third grade? Why is that a key statistic?
Well, what we're trying to do is improve our skills in our workforce. And it really goes all the way back to trying to make sure kids read at grade 3. By grade 3, you learn to read, and after the third grade, you read to learn. So we've got to get the kids reading by the end of the third grade. And if they're not reading proficiently, they're 4 times more likely to drop out of high school or drop out before they get a degree. So it's important to stress the early childhood education, especially reading and some math. We have the #1 quality pre-K program here in North Carolina. We were ranked #1, and one of the reasons is it does require teachers to pass a reading test to verify that they know how to teach reading. And that's extremely important that we keep that skill there in the pre-K.
That the kids need to keep reading, or the teachers need to understand how to teach so the kids are proficient at third grade?
There is a reading test for teachers, or there's a test for teachers to verify that they know how to teach reading. And you have to pass that, I think, by the end of the first or second year to be continued on as a pre-K teacher. Mm-hmm. That's why our quality is #1. But unfortunately, we rank 41st or 42nd in the country as to the number of kids that are actually going to into pre-K.
Venessa, you're nodding as if you're in agreement, and I suspect it's not leading, but are you in agreement with a lot of what Dr. Goodnight just said?
Absolutely, I am. I believe that 0 to 3rd grade is the foundation of a child's success in life. And as he stated, 0 to 3rd grade, you are reading, you're learning to read. And from there on, you're reading to learn and to comprehend. If you do not have a solid foundation in reading, then a lot of your challenges will come because you can't comprehend the other subjects and concepts in education. I believe that, as he said, 62% of 4th graders are not reading proficient. That's a challenge. That is a challenge for a child to progress successfully through their educational journey. And so we have studies that show, and Duke University recently put out a study, and they studied 1 million children through 5th grade.
Nationwide? Is this a nationwide?
Nationwide, and well, for North Carolina. Mm-hmm. And it shows that a successful pre-K foundation does not fade out. The positive outcome of that pre-K experience does not fade out over time, which proves that that is the foundation for a child to be successful in throughout their educational journey. And we're hoping that this is going to provide encouragement for them to, one, graduate from high school and continue on, whether it be through advanced studies or being career ready. So yes, I do agree.
So Terry, you know, you hear these studies, and that's the first time we've heard this about 3rd grade reading proficiency. Mm-hmm. And also, oh, by the way, these statistics aren't kind of on the margin and aren't arcane. I mean, they're pretty clear. So, and here we are, we've got three leaders in North Carolina who are standing abreast, and I know you represent many more. So where is the disconnect, maybe not with the business community, but in general, about saying, yeah, this is critical and we can do X or Y about that? Why does this seemingly have to be such a big push?
I think if we look back over time, we haven't been faced with what will be a serious labor crunch that we're all going to be faced with going forward. If we look across the United States, we're going to be 5 million people short on jobs. I think that gets CEOs' attention. I think more than that, in states like the Carolinas, which we see lots of people coming into our states, 2 very distinct things. Number one, we have a fundamental duty to make sure that we're taking the best care that we can of the people who are here in the Carolinas. At the same time, when we're bringing talent into our organizations, we want to make sure that we're keeping that talent in those organizations as well. Making sure that we have that type of an education program in North Carolina is important from a competitive perspective. So I think that's going to be a significant piece of the dialogue and why I think people are going to get it increasingly. The other piece of it that I think you're seeing more data that reveals is how important not just that reading early is, but how it helps other skills develop as well. The reading and the math is critical. The soft skills that come from that are awfully powerful as well. Analytical ability, the ability to communicate. These are things that as we continue to evolve in business, we're going to be awfully focused on. Mm-hmm. And I think the other thing that is missed in this is a highly nuanced conversation.
In what do you mean by that?
I think there's this sense at times that this is an economic conversation. There are pieces of this that are an economic conversation. There are pieces of this that are an accountability conversation. There are pieces of this that, how do you measure it? How do you put the right skills in the right places at the right time? The study that Venessa mentioned that Duke University had done actually looked at all 100 counties in our state and really looked at what's going on in those early years, and then to your point, what the fade out on that looked like. The fade out wasn't there as early as we had seen in reports from other states, but again, how we make sure that fade doesn't occur later and goes farther is something that I think we have to look at and understand. We're not going to have an answer for that today, but time will show us how we get even better at that, and we do have a very good program in North Carolina today.
Terry, you have a different take on this?
I would really echo most of what's already been said. I think, you know, if you look at the science, and I think to your question, it's really incumbent upon us to continue to educate people and to continue to focus on the facts. because the facts are that 80 to 90% of brain development happens in the first few years of life. And that's why these early stages, we say from birth to pre-K to third grade. I would even actually go before that, I would say prenatally. They're major determinants of the ability of a child to actually be successful in school. And so as we look at investing in education, I think it's important for us to recognize that the most effective investments in many ways are early. I think it's difficult because it takes some time for that investment to bear fruit. We're not going to see the return or the benefit, so to speak, overnight. It takes foresight, it takes the ability to look ahead and recognize that investing in these young children today is going to spell success 10 years plus hence.
So, Dr. Goodnight, you know a little something about statistical analysis. I would say you go back to, Terry just said, and there's been, everyone's referred to this at some point, it takes time for this to work. How much time will this take to work? If we start now and we have a model program on third grade reading proficiency and all the kids are doing well, how long will it take the antelope to get through the python, so to speak here?
Well, the major issue is making sure that kids that graduate from high school go on and get some secondary, post-secondary education, either training courses or college or community college, because 67% of the jobs in North Carolina are going to require that. So, for this to make a difference in our workforce, it's going to take, 9 or 10 years before we start to see the results as far as the workforce is concerned. But the great thing about it, though, it will help produce kids that are interested in school and will stay in school. If you can't read by the time you're in the 4th grade, then you are not going to like school. You're not going to participate in as many things, and you might tend to be disruptive in school, which causes a problem for the other kids. So it's really important that we get these kids started right.
Dr. Goodnight had just earlier, not to speak about you in the third party, but I'm going to take this in a different direction, talked a little bit about the teacher being obviously where the rubber meets the road and the one down there in the ground. I would ask you this, not just how important is that teacher's assimilation with the student to help them get to that third grade reading proficiency, but what does a teacher have to do? How and there's been a lot of talk about teacher pay. But what about teacher efficiency? When you look at some of the numbers in North Carolina, you see even in the best schools, top quartile, the efficiency of these teachers, for better or worse, is not even 25%. So how do we give teachers what they need? Because Lord knows they are bearing a huge amount of this burden. Where do we go? How do we start? How do we help teachers?
I think education with teachers has to be looked at just like we look at our businesses. An employee is a lot more productive when they feel appreciated, reward and recognition, and it doesn't always mean money. Teachers spend a great deal of time with our kids, and sometimes more time than they spend at home. And so it is incumbent upon us to ensure that our teachers have the tools and the resources and to be able to do their job, and that they have the latitude to do the job, and that there is a process in place to measure success. The other thing is that on the teacher's part, we have to learn to start teaching to a child's learning style. We can no longer have this one-size-fit-all mold because all kids don't learn in the same manner. So we have to have those types of resources available for the teachers to be able to utilize and to be able to have the help that they need. One, in being able to advance their education, because education is changing daily. And we've got to make sure that they are prepared to receive these children and give them the type of learning experience that is going to make them successful.
We are, if you just joined us, we're in the campus of SAS in Cary, North Carolina, and we're talking about third grade proficiency reading and how that factors into the, not just success of a child through the system, but the success of a child that becomes an adult and helps through fruition in North Carolina. Ward, what do you hear from teachers? What do they say to you besides, you know, we need $40,000 or $45,000 a year, we need commensurate pay for other states, blah, blah, blah. But what do teachers really need? Not to say that's not important, but what do you hear from teachers?
I think it's two different things. One, we need engagement. We need engagement from families. We need engagements from people who are governing our state. We need engagement from the business and civic communities. We need, number one, engagement. Number two, we need to make sure we are getting, from a training perspective, what we need. One of the best pieces of advice I think I was ever given was somebody said, don't ever take the class, take the teacher or take the professor. And I think there's great wisdom in that. And I think one of the things that we can do for teachers today is look at where they're teaching and what they're teaching and assure that they're getting the tools and the training that they need for that very specialized time period in a young person's life. As Dr. Goodnight was saying, if you don't have a good start, the catch-up is so dramatically hard to do over a period of time. Then the frustration comes, and that's what teachers see, and that's what they're experiencing. When they see success in the classroom, it not only fuels greater inspiration within them, it fuels more within the students as well. It comes back, in my view, and what I hear relative to engagement and relative to training.
So Terry, what does Cone do? What do you do on a personal, how do you connect to a teacher in Guilford County or Forsyth County, and how do you make sure that one teacher feels not just valued but successful? Do you have to do it a teacher at a time, or is it systematic, or is it something else that you see that you do?
Well, I connect with a teacher daily. I'm married to one.
Pillow talk is a powerful thing.
Indeed. So I've got a pretty unique window on what's happening or not happening, including in our public school systems. And I think it's so important, just to echo some of what's already been said, for us to really face the reality of what some of our teachers are contending with. There are examples around our state where some of our best teachers, who are highly committed individuals, passionate about what they do, they're distracted and they're put upon, to the point that some of them are having to come out of pocket to buy paper for their classrooms. They're having to come out of pocket to make copies for their students. This is not an acceptable situation, and we can't expect, with that kind of input, to get the best output. So I think that's one issue. The other thing that I hear from my wife, who's a high school teacher, is her colleagues deal with the downstream impact of our failure to invest early. And so I think one of the best things that we can do for our middle school and high school teachers is actually invest in early childhood education in this zone that we're talking about, so that by the time the kids get to them, they're actually prepared to effectively learn. And those teachers are not faced with the kind of remediation that becomes necessary, and is often an uphill battle, again, because the die is set early in life.
Well, that's a good point. So can third grade reading scores, can we hit that bogey, whatever that value is that we're setting? Can we do it without a good pre-K program, or even a mediocre pre-K program? Anyone?
Well, I mean, if you look at the results today, compare the kids that has gone through a successful pre-K program and those that has not, the foundations are different. I mean, the end result is different, because it has been proven that a child that has gone through a successful pre-K program, like the ones that we have here in North Carolina, has a brighter future. You know, is set up to succeed. So I think that, and that's not for all cases, because there are kids that succeed that has not gone through pre-K. But the majority is a challenge. It is a challenge for them. And so that is why the business community is rallying around the support of a 0 to 8 program that targets third grade reading. And, you know, we commend Senator Berger for the Read to Achieve program, and Governor Cooper, who has added money in his budget to increase the number of availability or slots for kids to be able to come into the pre-K program. We have 29,000 kids that are in there now. And last year, funding allowed another 260 kids to be able to go into pre-K. But there's still 36,000 kids that are able to go in there, but we don't have the availability. So what we're saying is that we have programs that are very good. We have policies that will allow this. But we've got to come together and ensure that we've got the commitment and we've got the funding to make it available for these other 36,000 kids.
How about, Dr. Goodnight, how about, we talk so much about teachers and now principals being debated during this General Assembly session, but what about outside the schools? What about not just parents, but what other resources outside of the institutional education is being missed or overlooked or certainly not leveraged?
Well, some of the things that SAS is doing is we develop online material for kids and teachers to use. It's called Curriculum Pathways, and there are thousands of modules in there to help teach science or help teach math or any social studies, history, any of that stuff. And it's all online, so kids can tap into that to help them outside the classroom.
Is that a parental-led, or is that mostly? Are we back to teachers leading?
No, it's up to teachers to sign the kids up for it. But it's free; it doesn't cost anything. We do that free of charge, and it's a wonderful program. We have over 2 million kids and teachers right now that are using it. So that's one of the things we can do.
Mm-hmm. What do you think? What other resources outside of institutional learning can be brought to bear here?
Well, I do think we do need to engage the business community, and that's what we're seeing through studies that the BRT have done as well as others. Organizations and corporations in North Carolina, and Martin Marietta's among them, SASA's, AT&T, Cone, all are very much engaged in their local communities in making sure that they're taking their learnings and what they're doing in business every day and putting it at a very foundational level. So if we think about what employment's going to look like over the next 20 years, science, technology, engineering, and math will clearly drive much of that. If we think about what we're doing in our business and local communities, a lot of it's around earth science and what we're seeing in creating truly the foundations of what our world will look like tomorrow. These are important things for us to make sure we're communicating in the right way. We need to have highly engaged employees. And highly engaged employees in a local community matters more than anything else, at least from an outside source perspective.
Yeah, I want to come back to that. On our second part of this program, which we're going to do next week, I want to drill down a little bit more the business community, responsibility, how to lead here. Before we do that, Terry, let me come back to you, since you are married to a teacher, and I'm sure proud about it. What other resources outside of the school does your wife say, if only we could engage the parents or the grandparents or the village that it takes for the child to raise? I mean, what else is out there? And we have about 2.5 minutes.
And it really does take a village. And one of the reasons that Cone Health and I personally am so invested in this is because not only is this an issue around economic development and having the right workforce over a long period of time. We're a large employer, but we also are an organization that's committed to improving the health of the communities we serve. And I think my wife would tell you that a healthy child is a child that's ready to learn, and these are so closely tied. The research shows that a major determinant of health status over one's life cycle is poverty and education. Education's tied to poverty. But I actually co-chair a group out of Guilford County called Ready for School, Ready for Life, and it's focused on the heart of the matter. It's focused on bringing businesses together. It's focused on bringing community-based organizations together to actually pool our resources and enhance and coordinate the way early childhood services, again, from pre-birth all the way into grade school are delivered.
We have less than a minute, Venessa. I want to get you, because you grew up in Wake County.
I did.
And you went to a school now that's considered at risk and has a fairly high instance of reduced and free lunches. Is that right?
Yes, that is correct.
How much weighting does that give to a child? And you've got about 30 seconds to add. How much weighting does that give to a child who's not ready for all of these other things if they have this on their mind?
Well, for one thing, we sometimes use that term at risk very loosely because it can be. I was one of those what people would consider at risk, but I was at risk of doing great things because of education. And so you mentioned earlier about what about the kids that don't get in the pre-K? Well, that's why we at AT&T, we have programs through our philanthropic Aspire program that tries to catch those kids and help encourage them to stay in school.
Last word, thank you. That was good for wrapping that up so quickly. Thank you. Until next week, I'm Chris William. Good night.
Major funding for Carolina Business Review was provided by the Duke Endowment, Bearings, Grant Thornton, Novant Health, Sunoco, Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina, and by viewers like you. Thank you. Promotional consideration provided by Business North Carolina Magazine. For more information, visit carolinabusinessreview.org.